Hello, so I'm here with Sam Crockett from Harris Jackson Interior Design, and this is Laura from Pride Road, New Forest and Bournemouth. So, Sam is an interior designer, and I'm an architect, and we've met recently and done a bit of work together and thought it'd be really interesting to ask each other some questions about our fairly similar but obviously different paths into our careers. So I'm going to start, we're both going to ask each other a few questions. I'm going to start by asking you, Sam, how did you get into interior design?
Ooh, I'll try and keep this brief because it is quite a long story. Hello, Laura. Anyway,
Hello.
hello. So, how did I get into interior design? I actually trained as a set and costume designer for film and theatre, would you believe?
Hmm.
But having graduated, I had kind of had enough of theatre and film and wanted to try something different. And I'd been working for Habitat throughout my degree.
Oh, wow.
And on the back of that, I obviously had an interest in interiors. Kind of was the precursor to everything after that. So I graduated and worked for Habitat a little bit longer and then went to work at Chelsea Harbour Design Centre for a very prestigious international fabric house. And they supplied fabrics and wall coverings and furniture and lighting to the interior design industry across the UK. And that literally introduced me to the interior design industry and a lot of interior designers in London. So I kind of suddenly found myself entrenched in this industry of luxury residential design, hotels, corporate design, you name it, and just learnt very quickly, but
Mm.
on the sales and marketing side. And then from there, I went to work for some interior designers that I'd met out on the job.
Hmm.
And there it began. But I did skip back to film and theatre design for 6 years. I worked as a freelancer in the West End of London for 6 years. But that's really when I incorporated the two loves of interiors and the theatrical design, is where my passion for hospitality design,
Okay. Yeah.
because it's all about creating an experience. And almost when you walk through those doors into a hotel reception lobby lounge, you are entering into a world, another world.
Yeah. You want to be
Just
escapism.
about visual, is it? It's about every sense, what you smell, what you taste, the tactile qualities of what's around you.
Hmm.
So that's how I got into interiors, through
Brilliant.
film theatre.
Okay. Really interesting.
So shall I ask you, Laura? Shall I come back to you? Shall
Okay.
I really ask you your question, or would you like to respond?
You asked me a question.
Okay, so my question, a little bit similar, was where did you study architecture and what was your qualification? Because I gather, I think there are different types of architects out there, aren't there?
Um, a little bit. So I studied at Sheffield University. There's quite a lot of schools of architecture. There are about, I think there's about 20 now. And there's
Mhm.
kind of 12 red brick ones, which was what I was very steered towards from my girls' grammar school. None of this going to Polly's business. Um, and my qualification is, so you do a degree, which is 3 years, and that's fairly standard, a BA. Some of them are BScs, 3 year degree, and then you have a year out where you work and practice and you have to get experience. And that's where kids coming out now are going to struggle. You've got to have a certain amount of hours before you can go back and do a diploma, which is the next thing you do, diploma in architecture. Then you're done at university, so that's 5 years, and 5 years studying, so 6 years since you started, and then you do a professional qualification whilst you're working, and that takes minimum a year, and then you become chartered. So a few people, there are a few courses that might be engineering and architecture together, and a few are interior architectures, but that's quite rare. Most are just normal architecture. So once you have done your final qualifications, then you can call yourself an architect. So it's a protected title. Anybody that you see as an architectural designer or anything like that, they're not an architect. They've not done those professional qualifications. And then if you join the RIBA, you can then call yourself a chartered architect. So
Which is the Royal Institute of British Architects.
that's right. And then you can put that after your name. So that's what I am.
Gosh, it's a long stint, isn't it? Training to be a
It's
nurse.
7 years minimum. Yeah, it's the same as medicine. Yeah, and that's a real issue for obviously tuition fees and amount of
Yes.
debt that lots of students are getting into now. Although most of them don't seem to be too worried because they just don't think they'll ever earn enough to have to pay it back. But it's a long haul.
Yeah.
They're trying to improve it so that you could do bits of it part time because it is a big ask. And certainly as a woman, I always felt, goodness, I must get qualified before I start a family or anything, because can you imagine trying to do that once you had kids come along? So it does take a big chunk of life. Like doing it as a mature student would be a big challenge, I think.
Yeah, really big challenge. You'd
Yeah.
probably end up kind of almost giving up at some point, not actually completing
Yeah.
it. You know, a real shame, wouldn't it?
So I'm going to ask